The NBA is trending in good directions for the Utah Jazz. And finally, could we stop? It's not the drop coverage that's the problem. Next on Locked On Jazz.
You are Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It is Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA Insider. On today's show, first we're going to talk about where some things are trending correctly for the Utah Jazz and the way the league is going. Number two, we're going to get geeky. Really, really geeky. And hopefully you're interested, because this is certainly one of those times where I have to get this off my chest. Stan Van Gundy did a great job last night and actually even started to bring up the whole issue. The obsession with criticizing drop coverage every single time Rudy Gobert, particularly, is in drop coverage kills me. The problem is that Luka Doncic is simply unguardable. And we're going to look at 5 plays late in that game where Luka was unbelievable. And they're in drop coverage, and that's the problem. It's not the problem. And I'm going to dig into the numbers of why someone like Chris Finch, who's never believed in drop coverage in any way, shape, or form, would possibly go to drop coverage. In fact, the whole entire rub in Minnesota last year was that he wouldn't play drop coverage and drove Rudy crazy. And then all of a sudden he does it. Well, because it's probably the right answer against Luka. So let's walk through those things here on today's show as well. I am David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA Insider. This is Locked On Jazz. It's your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. We are free, available on all podcasting apps, and this is kind of fun, on YouTube. So thank you. Now, if you could please subscribe and follow for free on your podcasting app, and on YouTube, subscribe and hit that little bell button that tells you that you are the little bell button will tell you every single time we open up and do a show. That would be great. I would super appreciate it. So thank you very much for doing so. All right. Let's get to the first thing that's going on in the NBA. There's a bunch of trends right now that if you're a Jazz fan, I don't think it's very easy to be a Jazz fan right now, right? Like, I think you're looking at the landscape and you're watching the playoffs and you wish you were there and you understand that we're in a process, but it's hard. I'm with you 100%. Okay. So 100% with you that it's hard right now on this. Number two, you're like looking at some of these players and what they're doing in their playoff performances. And you're like, yeah, like, how do we get there? I don't know. Like, we'll talk about it. There's a chance we're going to be projected to be 15th in the West next year as we sit right here. Okay. Like, it's hard, but league wide, there's some interesting things going on. Number one, Rudy Gobert is the last standing player of the 17th highest paid players in the NBA. Like, something's happening here where the highest paid players aren't advancing in the playoffs. And the only hypothesis that I can give you on this is that we go back to what we've talked about an awful lot on this program, which is 240 minutes a night of basketball. Actually matters in the playoffs as well as the regular season. Throughout the year, the feeling really was that the 240 minutes, which when the Jazz had 240 minutes and suddenly looked really good, that we saw the impact of the Jazz having 240 minutes of play, that the Jazz ended up being, a way better basketball team than people expected and ended up being winning way more games. And it was because, quite frankly, in my opinion, it was because we were actually having enough guys out on the floor every single night who could play quality NBA minutes. That's turning out to matter a little bit in the playoffs as well. That's maybe a little surprising because the theory was that you didn't need Phoenix Milwaukee, Denver, that you didn't need a complete roster because when you got to the playoffs, it wouldn't matter. So you just get through it until you get there. Well, none of them are playing. And frankly, Dallas, to me, my biggest concern watching Dallas last night is whether or not they actually have 240 because Dante can't play in the playoffs. Just doesn't have that toughness. And then they're playing James Harden, who is all right, but he's borderline. Tim Hardaway's borderline, and they're stretching with Maxi Kleber out to get to 240 minutes. But Indiana's probably survived because they have 240, and Boston, without Kristaps Porzingis, gets a little tight. But the fact is, it's hard. You've got to have 240 minutes. So this kind of weird note that Rudy Gobert is the last of the highest, 20 players paid or 17 highest paid players in the NBA who's still playing right now. It's kind of a strange note. You hear it and you're like, well, what does that mean? Well, it means that these teams that are being put together with a collection of superstars are suddenly having a hard time putting together a complete roster and being able to win playoff games and, frankly, somewhat regular season games. That's to our advantage. That's good for the Utah Jazz because it is unlikely, as much as we may be trying, that we're going to be able to put together a roster that is 3 max players. Like, we're unlikely to get Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, and Bradley Beal to come to Utah. It's unlikely, right? We might be able to link together some sort of Giannis Antetokounmpo, Chris Middleton, Brook Lopez if we draft it right? If Denver drafted Jokic, Murray, and Michael Porter Jr. and did it in Aaron Gordon with a trade, there are scripts where which we can do this. And frankly, I still think it's the way everyone's going to build the team. But there is a point here where I'm beginning to wonder, in the NBA, you might be better off having 2 stars and then a cadre of players that are all pretty good and having a complete roster. That's a more manageable thing for the Jazz to try to build than trying to build a 3-star game. And then even the little underlying aspect of the 3-star game is that you have to be in a market where people are wanting to come and sign for the minimum. Phoenix, because it's weather and everything else, might be all right here this offseason, where everybody with a minimum is going to say, well, that's a good place to go play. It'll be fun to go live in Phoenix while the weather's good. You're going to have a harder time doing that in Detroit, Salt Lake City, in some other places, Indiana. But Indiana's got Tyrese Halliburton, who they're going to max out. Now they got to pay him $41 million extra because he made All-NBA. And they've got Miles Turner, who they've paid a lot. And then they've really built a roster of a bunch of players that are pretty good. Nembhard, Nesmith, even Jalen Smith coming off the bench, McConnell, pretty good. Indiana did something interesting a few years ago where they just paid everybody like $1 more than the mid-level exception and had just a bunch of players like that. That's something we can do. So that's a model. The NBA is heading our direction. The MVPs not winning, the superstars not winning. It's good. Now, we're about to talk about a superstar in Luka who's just unguardable. But this is the issue right now, I think, is what we're seeing is pretty good for the Jazz. All right, one note I wanted to give you just so you hear this first and start to wrap your head around this insanity. So the NBA is on the verge of their new TV contract. Their new TV contract is going to be somewhere in the range of like $70 million. Or $7 billion, excuse me. Of course, there we go. Here's my note. $7 billion. In 28-29, it's just a few years away, the max salary, first year max salary, is going to be $72 million a year. The 5th year of that max salary is going to be $95 million a year. We're getting close to the $100 million player. And a 5-year max contract is going to be $419 million. 5-year, $419 million. It's $500 million, people, for a player to play 5 years of basketball. Insanity. But that's where we're going with this TV coverage or this new TV contract. $7 billion. All right. We are going to look at 5 plays with Luka Doncic late in game. But first, we're going to do an entire numbers analysis of why, 1, guarding Luka is impossible, and 2, Chris Finch wasn't wrong last night in the way he did it. It's coming up next as we're just getting started on today's edition of Locked On Jazz. Today's edition of Locked On Jazz is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNBA. We do, obviously, Locked On continues to grow. We're doing a bunch of hiring along the way. And what do we need most? We need it to be efficient, and we need to be quick, and we need to get it done. Because if you're a small company and you're hiring, it takes so darn long and so much time and effort and all the rest. So this is where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. You find quality professionals that are right for the role quickly. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. It's a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats, so that's why 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNBA to link your job for free. Thanks so much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all podcasting apps. If you have not made the switch yet, do so to Locked On NBA, Locked On Sports Today. It is our 24/7 streaming channel, the first ever. It's on YouTube for you, Locked On Sports Today. It's also on Amazon Fire TV right now, watching Matt Williamson, Brian Peacock, and Williamson going over some NFL 30 for 30s with guest John Costco. A lot of fun stuff coming up. Plus, later today, I haven't seen the word yet. Oh, it's probably in. Let's see if I have a programming guide of what's coming up today here's what's coming up today on NBA. The Mavs will air right about the time this show airs. Then the Wolves will follow that. Pacers and Celtics later today, twice coming your direction. So a lot of that. And we'll also have some NHL stuff with the Stars and the Oilers starting their series. We got a crossover edition on that will air at 2:30 Mountain Time. So a lot of great stuff coming up on Locked On Sports Today. All right, let's talk about Luka for a second. It's really awesome. Remember, this really takes me back to that epic Quinn Snyder press conference where he ran through all the numbers of what you do against Luka. Now, Luka was amazing. First time he's looked normal and great. He had 15 points in the fourth quarter last night and showed. Here's some numbers on Luka, okay? So on the pick and roll, I feel like I should maybe put these into a little banner for those of you that are watching on YouTube. I will throw in some little graphics. On the pick and roll, Luka is 1.06 points per chance and 1.09 on a direct pick and roll. Okay? So that's the first number on Luka. If you switch it, okay, Luka goes to 1.12 and 1.15, which are the same as his ISO numbers. So here's the first thing about guarding Luka, okay? And that is he's at 1.06 points per chance and 1.09 on a direct pick and roll. Those numbers are stupid. That's some of the best in the league. The Mavericks offense last night was a 115 because a bunch of isolation possessions. Remember, in the half court, you're averaging about a point of possession. So anything over a point of possession in the half court is just great. So when Luka's at 1.06 or 1.09, you're great. So the first thing you cannot have happen with Luka is let him play isolation. He'll kill you. So Luka's isolation number is 1.12 or 1.15. 1.12 per chance, 1.15. So when he wants to go ISO, as he did late in the game, and he goes into that right side ISO, that's the worst case scenario. Now, if you switch it, you have 3 choices when you play pick and roll, really. Okay, you have 4. You can play drop, which is the big man drops to the level of the rolling big, and he retreats back, and it feels very soft, and it doesn't feel aggressive, and it feels bad, and it works. If you play drop, Okay. You can hedge, where you come out, try to alter the ball handler's route, and then in enough time so that the defender gets back to his man and the big gets back to the big. You can switch. The hedge is interesting, hard to do. Means Rudy has to come out on Luka and get back to Lively or Gafford rolling. Hard to do. So you're actually kind of better off at that point just blitzing 2 people to the ball and bring a weak side low man defender. Rudy says it in his interview with Allie Clifton last night, like, well, the low guy's got to come down too. Like, their low guy was not coming down for it. But the problem for Minnesota is a lot of time their low guy is Mike Conley. And you can't have Mike Conley be your low guy. He's 6'1". So your fourth choice is you switch. Okay, you can't switch on Luka because then he's just into an ISO. And he's choosing his defender. So let's throw that one out. You just can't switch. Unless you're going to go switch with Rudy and have Rudy guard Luka out at 25 feet. And we've seen that that's a problem. So now your choices are really, to some extent, you're either blitzing Luka with a hard double team, getting the ball out of his hands, and then rotating out of it, or 2, you're playing drop coverage. So let's talk about the blitz. The ball gets out of Luka's hands. There's the positive. The negative is you're giving up a wide open 3. Dallas moves the ball. They space it correctly in a playoff series. If they know it's coming, it's a wide open 3. League average on wide open 3s is 39.6%. Dallas's league average this year was 40%. That's 1.2 points per possession. I watched early in this game. I saw what was happening. They blitzed a few more times, and I thought the TV crew kind of gave on to. The guys were wide open. And I sat there the whole time saying to myself, like, I cannot believe that can be your that can be your decision of what you're going to do for the playoffs. Is that you're just going to leave guys wide open. Tim Hardaway Jr., wide open 3s, 43% this year. Josh Green, wide open 3s, 42% this year. Jaden Hardy, 39%. Maxi Kleba, if he plays, 39%. Even Derek Jones, their worst shooter, 35%. The interesting one's PJ Washington shot terribly all year. 24% on corner 3s, 33% on wide open 3s for the year. And now he's shooting 42% on wide open 3s in the playoffs. Derek Jones is shooting 38% on wide open 3s in the playoffs. Josh Green's at 35%. Kyrie's at 54%. You blitz Luka Doncic every single play, or most of the plays. Dallas at some point, Jason Kidd's good. Dallas is going to put guys into designated spots so that when the ball gets moved, it gets to them and they get the right guy. They're going to put Kyrie into the corner. And you're going to rotate to Kyrie for a wide open flipping 3. I just can't believe that's the right play. So you have Rudy Gobert, who's the best defensive big maybe in the history of the game or in the top 5. 4-time defensive player in the year. And so you play a soft drop. They're going to have to be a little bit more aggressive with it. But the minute they get more aggressive with it and Rudy comes up to the point of the screen, Gafford and Lively get behind him, Luka throws the lob, and the weak guy side doesn't come in, then we all blame Rudy. It's not Rudy's fault. But the fact is, last night, Dallas goes 6 of 25 for 3. They only get 4 corner 3s the entire game. They only throw 246 passes the entire game. They only shoot 17 free throws the entire game. Their pick and roll offense yields 0.93 points per pick and roll. I would say that Minnesota's coverage last night worked perfectly, and they lost, which is concerning if you're Minnesota. But there's a level where I think you're going to listen to every commentator out there today talking about various things. And I thought Stan Van Gundy brought up a problem with the drop, didn't like it, and then started to waver during the broadcast, which I admire him for, and I know Stan well, so I'm a little biased here because I think he's great at what he does. Where he suddenly said, well, wait a sec, they're not sending him to the free throw line. They're not giving up corner wide open 3s. They're not giving up 3s. Oh, like Luka in the paint is deadly, but it's not more than 1.0 points per possession, right? A mid-range shot by Luka, which feels like he's closer to the basket, it's better. is way better than it being in isolation, is way better than Luka swinging it out of a double team to a wide open shooter. It's way better than Luka in isolation getting your guys in foul trouble. It's the best of 4 choices on a player that is simply unguardable. Like, walk through it. Luka goes and plays isolation. You switch or you want to let him play ISO. He's playing ISO. He's at 1.15 points per possession in the half court. Holy. You let him swing to a wide open three-point shooter. Wide open three-point shooters in the NBA shoot 40% on threes. That's 1.2 points per possession. You want to play soft drop coverage. Luka's at 1.06 points per pick and roll or 1.09. It's still brilliant. You can take Luka out if you blitz him, but they have now built a team that has Kyrie, and you're going to have to decide, and maybe it is fun. Maybe the choice is, and I think Minnesota's going to get there because that's actually what Chris Finch's instinct is. I've had plenty of conversations with Chris Finch in which, particularly last year, we talked about using Rudy, and he just did not love drop coverage. And then he's always blitzed with Karl-Anthony Towns, and they struggled playing 2 different style of defenses, one with Towns and one with Luka. But the fact is they rolled Luka off some pick and rolls with Karl-Anthony Towns just to get the double team, just to get the open threes. I thought Dallas managed it well. But also the fact is you get right down to the numbers on this one. If you get right down to the numbers and you look them up, the points per pick and roll in last night's game for the Dallas Mavericks, I believe, was 0.93. What that means is that when the defensive coverage that you got worked. Let me make sure I'm confirming this. I don't want to be wrong. I have it down in my notes. 0.93. 71 pick and rolls, 0.93 points per pick and roll. Now, part of the story is Dallas got in transition a lot. They got 21 plays in transition to 1.3 points in transition. When Minnesota played soft coverage for most of the night. And the defense was basically average. But Dallas wins this game. Dallas doesn't win this game in the half court. They win it actually because Minnesota's offense wasn't great. And they win it because they had 25% offensive rebounding. And they win it because of the fact that Luka went nuts late. And we'll look at some of those possessions. But they didn't win it because Minnesota sat in a drop coverage, which is, by the way, yes, part of this is it's just another way to criticize Rudy Gobert when he shouldn't be criticized. All right, coming up, we're going to look at 5 Luka plays and try to analyze this with a little bit more depth. I hope you like the analysis of basketball here, and as we try to make you smarter and better basketball fan every day here on Locked On Jazz. Today, next episode of Locked On Jazz is brought to you by our friends over at BetterHelp. And really, BetterHelp is here to be your friend as well. BetterHelp, convenient, flexible, online therapy. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA. I think of therapy as performance enhancing, right? I go to the gym so that I'm a better athlete. I go to the gym so I'm in better shape for health, performance, and enhancing. I do reading so that I'm smarter. I try to learn things so I'm better. And this is a way to be a better human, performance enhancing, whether it's interactions with your spouse, with your kids, with your employers, for your own benefit, in your own free time, in your own quiet space, when your brain goes crazy. Learn why, if you have a pattern of behavior that you're getting stuck in, why you have a hard time getting happy, why you have a hard time getting rolling. It's entirely online. It's designated to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. So fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist. You can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge, which is pretty amazing. Get it off your chest with BetterHelp. BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today. Get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. Therapy, to me, is a chance to be performance enhancing, no differently than all the other things that you do in life to be performance enhancing. And let BetterHelp, it's convenient online therapy, help you out. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA. That's 10% off your first month. BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA. All right, let's play a little share screen here. And let's see if we can do this. This is off the NBA account, which is not always the easiest to manage. So here's Luka, pick and roll with Derek Lively, middle of the floor. And if you're on audio, I think I'm going to be able to walk you through this, so don't freak out. So it's a high pick and roll. Luka's going to go to his left hand. They're going to play drop, which means Rudy is now retreating. Dallas is perfectly spaced. They have PJ Washington in the right corner, and I think they have Tim Hardaway Jr. in the left corner, and they have Kyrie high left. Okay, so they are perfectly spaced, and there's nobody else in the paint. This is part of the story here. If you're looking at the screen right now, there's not a single foot of a Minnesota defender in the paint because they're trying to make sure they don't shoot threes, and Dallas was 6 of 25 on threes, so that worked. Sometimes you can do a defensive plan, have it work, lose the game, and it's still the right plan. So Luka's now coming with a left hand. Rudy is going to drop, retreat back as Lively rolls. Rudy's job is to stay at the one step below Lively. Luka is so big and so strong, and Jaden McDaniel is not Lou Dort. I think this is the bigger story. Jaden McDaniel is skinny and long, but he's not Lou Dort. So he can't physically get back into the play. Luka now hesitates, slows down, watches the play. Go back to the comment that Jason Kidd made to Ron Boone about late passes, that Luka leads the league in late passes. And so Luka comes down the middle of the lane, stops the free throw line. Lively is now a step behind Rudy. Rudy's really stuck in no man's land. But the bigger story is that nobody on either corner is sinking in because the game plan for Minnesota is to force Luka to take short mid-range shots, which are at best 50% shots, not get to the free throw line, and not give up open threes. Really what they're playing is this is 1.0 points per possession or less. It's the right mathematical call. If you bring Naz Reid in to help and let Rudy go up high, it's a PJ Washington wide open right corner three. That's wide open corner three is a 1.2 point per possession. If Luka's playing isolation on someone who's guarding him tight, he's going to draw a foul and go to the line. That's 1.4 points and you're in foul trouble. If you let Luka go ISO, it's 1.2. So this is the right play. Luka gets in there. He takes a tough fadeaway jumper and he makes it because he's Luka, because he's just that darn good. So that's the first thing here. Is it just because the play doesn't yield a stop doesn't mean it was the wrong play? Let's go to another one. 9:42 left. I have 9:42. Luka scores again. Am I in the wrong quarter? Yes. Give me 1 second. You're going to watch me do some searching here. Okay, here's Luka again. And again, but you're all right here. For those of you that are on video, you'll get to see it on YouTube. But I think that you'll see the same concept here. Here it is. This time, because Luka's unbelievable, he's going to the right. Here's one note on this that's interesting. And Ron Boone talks about this a lot on our broadcast. Luka's at the Minnesota Timberwolves logo, and it's a small logo in the middle of the floor. And they're picking him up this high. Ron's point, I think, would be that the pickup point is too high. That you need to drop the pickup point. That Luka is able to play by having Jaden McDaniels pick up Luka Doncic at 35 feet. You end up having Derek Lively setting the pick, and now Rudy's got to guard 35 feet of space on this in drop coverage. Again, no feet in the paint. Pick. Luka's coming to his right this time. Lively sets a nice pick. Gobert's dropping. Naz Reid is sucking on Tim Hardaway on the right side. Kyrie has now dropped down to that corner. Here's Dallas has made the switch. Kyrie is now in the left. You double team. Right now, if you double team, you're giving up a wide open corner three to Kyrie Irving who makes 50% of that shot. Here's the pick and roll. Now Luka gets McDaniel, and I don't think Jaden McDaniel's doing a very good job on this. Conley digs in from the top a little bit more off PJ Washington. I thought Minnesota did a good job of choosing who shots where. When Derek Jones is in the game, you've got to leave him wide open to make it. But Luka gets in the paint. Conley gets back to his left hand. Jaden McDaniel's now lost. Luka steps back for a free throw line jumper and hits it. That's not a high percentage shot. We can talk about the drop coverage and all this other stuff about this and all these things. Luka taking a 15-foot left-footed fadeaway is that Luka's awesome. But that doesn't mean that Minnesota's defense is bad. Honestly, that means that they took a decision and mathematically made a reasonable, logical decision on what the right defense was, and Luka beat him at it. And sometimes the other guys are good, but I am 100% certain what the narrative is going to be all day long, and the narrative is wrong. Here it is again. Again, question the high pickup point. Luka's sitting at the logo. Minnesota's picking him up all the way up at the logo. Lively sets the pick. This time, Dallas spaces it a little different. They bring two guys to the right-hand side. Derrick Jones is now in the game. Kyrie is out of the game at this point with 7:43 left. Minnesota should be able to clog the paint a little bit more here. Luka drives to the left hand. McDaniel's trailing by a lot. I don't think Jaden McDaniel had a very good game. Lively's now rolling down. Rudy is stuck. Luka is now slowed the game down. He's one step inside the three-point line. Lively is rolling on the right side of the basket. Gobert is really covering a lot of space. Karl Anthony Towns is one step off P.J. Washington in the right corner. They are not sucking in at all or helping. Tim Hardaway Jr. is in the right corner, and Anthony Edwards is still not in the paint. And Mike Conley is close to Derrick Jones, who can't shoot. He's got to be bumping Lively, but Mike Conley's 6 feet tall, so it doesn't help. Lively drives. Rudy Gobert's got to drop. Now, Lively sets a pick on Gobert, which is what they're basically doing to take Rudy out of the game. And then McDaniel fouls Luka Doncic, who gets into the paint. Now, on that one, Rudy is so soft that Lively's able to pick him and move him out of the way, and that's a problem. Dallas does a neat little thing here later where they run a new play. They run, and I think we're going to see this play some more. Minnesota's running something that gets them a 4 or 5 pick and roll out of a similar set. But this is a double stagger. So now Jason Kidd up 97-92 with 7 minutes left, changes the set. And here's the fourth and final one of Luka we're going to look at. And this time, Gafford's in the game instead of Lively, and he's going to run a double stagger. Instead of a single pick at the top, there's going to be two guys. So Luka comes into it. He's coming left to right. Again, McDaniel's picking him up at midcourt. The pick is set at the very top of the three-point circle. And the first one picking it is Derrick Jones, who's a non-shooter. Mike Conley's being hidden on Derrick Jones. And the second one is Daniel Gafford, who's the roller. They've got a guy in each corner. So Luka comes across the first pick from Jones. The Wolves do not switch it because they don't want Mike Conley and Luka. That's the number one thing Timberwolves do not want is any circumstance where Mike Conley ends up guarding Luka. The second pick comes from Gafford, and Gafford rolls. Now, McDaniel's really trailing Luka by a decent amount because Conley didn't switch. So Gafford is rolling. Karl Anthony Towns is guarding P.J. Washington on the right side, and he is sucked in. At some point, you're going to have to decide that Karl Anthony Towns is standing in the paint here to stop the driver to help out Rudy or to help out the weak side, and you're going to give up that corner three. That's going to be it. Minnesota's going to make that choice at some point. So Luka drives into the paint. Gafford rolls. From the far corner, Anthony Edwards sucks in for the first time and is actually going to bump Gafford. So Rudy can come up higher. Rudy comes up a little bit higher, and what does Dončić do? Drives right into him and draws the foul because he's Luka Doncic. So Minnesota makes an adjustment off that double stagger where they're now bringing in the weak side help to let Rudy play it a little tighter, and promptly Luka Doncic reads it almost immediately and then draws a little contact and a foul. I do think this is the answer, probably more than what they're doing right now and forcing that. Mike Conley, for some bizarre reason, is face guarding Derrick Jones at the top of the key. You should be willing to give up that three at any moment and any time. The one note I would say, you're also going to hear how Anthony Edwards was really very quiet. I honestly think this is where Rudy's a little bit of an issue for them. And that is when Rudy's in the game, there's just not a lot of room for Anthony Edwards to drive. And that was really obvious last night. All right. Hope you enjoyed that. Let me know. A little breakdown of the greatness of Luka, but also I'm going to tell you, maybe I'm going to be wrong. I'm just pre-guessing what you're going to hear for 24, 48 hours about that game. I don't think it's accurate. I don't think Chris Finch had a bad game. I don't think Minnesota's game plan was wrong. I don't think the drop coverage is wrong. I don't know what you're supposed to do about Luka Doncic. That is Locked on Jazz. Have a great one. Talk to you soon. Now we send you over to the first ever 24/7 national streaming channel. It's called Locked on Sports Today. If you're on audio, flip over to YouTube or Amazon Fire TV and get Locked on Sports Today.